everyone. Welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. On this episode, I'm delighted to be talking with author Suzana Flores. Suzana is the author of Untamed, The Psychology of Marvel's Wolverine, as well as Facehooked, I believe is the name of the book. Is that second one correct? Yes, yes. So someone who has an interest in pop culture, trends, technology, and a character that I love, which is Wolverine. Susanna, thank you for jumping in and talking with me.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely, absolutely. What inspired you to write a book about Logan the Wolverine?
Well, many moons ago, I was never a comic book fan, right? That
Hmm.
was not part of my goal. As a psychologist, like I would have never in my wildest dreams imagined that I would write about a short, surly, powerful mutant named Logan. I was drawn to him because, we all have trauma in some form. We all have like challenges of some form.
Hmm.
And there was a point in my life where I experienced like an assault. And when that happens, the same thing happens to us as it happens to other people, right? Like there's depression, there's fear, there's anxiety. And I was just in a very low place. And the day came when a friend of mine, Alpadia, said, you remind me of the Wolverine, because I also have chronic pain, right? And I'm also dealing with trauma. And I was like, that's interesting, but I dismissed it. And then one day I was walking by a comic book store and I saw a panel of Wolverine of Hellfire, I believe, and he was down in the down in a dungeon, like covered in filth, and like he was beaten in battle. But
Hmm.
then the sheep, right? But you know which one I'm talking, right? So the claws come out, and he had this incredible sneer, right? And he's like, "Okay, suckers, now it's my turn." And I was
Hmm.
like, "Oh, he's gonna mess, right? He's gonna mess some people up." And at that moment, like I just couldn't stop staring at it because I wanted to be there, right? Like I wanted that to be me. I wanted like a fight back. So anyone who's like experiencing, depression or so, it's like it takes a lot to get you to the fight point, right? Like okay, like that fire in you. And so I just kind of like I couldn't stop thinking about him. And then so curiosity hit, and I just started doing research on my beloved character.
Nice, nice. So, I love how there's a lot to explore in that character, and I love how sometimes people look at pop culture and they think, well, this is just this thing, but there's a lot more to it, and years and years of authors behind creating characters like that. As you were getting to know the character, as you were writing the book, did that affect your processes? Was there an impact that that made on you?
Well, yeah, like it was healing, absolutely. So once I just started reading, comics, and I spoke with Al and some other of my geek friends, like, where do I start, right? And they're like, well, it's like
Hmm.
over 40 years, but okay, right? And so I started with Origin, um, Paul Jenkins, and who wrote the forward, by the way, and so had a chat with him. I reached out, had a chat with him, and then I think I just started interviewing people. That's how the process started. Right. So I just started, John Romita Jr. was the first person that I hunted down at a Comic Con. And I said, okay, I'm writing this project, and I just have a couple of quick questions. And if you want to know about what he said, I guess you do probably, right? But
Hmm.
he was the first one that I think that like really solidified it. Like it has to be written. And so he said, well, why Wolverine? You're a psychologist, right? What made you do this? And I said, well, Batman is the most popular of DC, right? And that's been done. And so Wolverine at the time was like the most popular of Marvel. So I decided to do that. And his response was, well, that's wonderful. Now tell me why you really wrote about Wolverine or why you're writing about Wolverine. And so I just said, pain,
Hmm.
pain. And then so I told him my story, and he told me, as being a person from New York after 9/11, right? He felt incredible rage. Like, he's like, it's my New York. Don't you, like it affected everybody, but New Yorkers, like to the heart, right? And so he said, like, when you get there, right, like you see red. and it must be very difficult for him to be judge, jury, and executioner. Like it's a lot of burden. Like he does the bloodbath that the other mutants don't want to do, and and there's so many other and he's loyal. We'll get to that, but he's the one that like I'm like okay, I can like not only I can write this character. I know trauma. I'm a trauma specialist, in fact, right? And I know what he does. He pushes people away. Don't want to get too close. Very, very common for people with PTSD. But you want to get close, but then you push people away. You want to get close and you push people away, right? And then there's anger and irritability. And I'm like, I can write this guy. And as it continued, and especially Weapon X, right? That was I needed like a Disney movie after the Weapon X series on torture, right? And I was like, okay, um, that was hard, but I got through it, and it's realizing like the way to the other side is through it,
Mhm.
and then getting to know resiliency and strength. So yes, it definitely was a healing process for me.
Cool. Cool. Yeah. Well, and I love the possibilities for what we can experience through any form of literature. That's a big part of what inspires me about comics and literature in general. Why do you think that people are so attracted to characters like Wolverine and so fascinated with sort of analyzing these characters?
I think of comic books as modern mythology. Like just like all mythology, they tell stories of the human experience, right? The hero's journey, like how like what kind of challenges we have to get through in order to get some level of in order to evolve and get some level of enlightenment
Hmm.
and learn, and realizing through those challenges like what we're really made of and who we are, and defending people that can't defend themselves. Like we want to be those people, right? We want to be those characters. And I think anti-heroes, like people really love the anti-heroes, right? Because I think anti-heroes, and this is especially why I was attracted to Wolverine. Like I didn't need Superman. I spoke about, I did a TEDx talk called Untamed, what Wolverine teaches us about rage, right? And it's in defense of anger, right? So this guy's pissed off, right?
Hmm.
So I didn't want Superman because Superman would take the bad guy and take him to the police because that's the right thing to do, right? I wanted someone dirty,
Yeah.
right? Like someone that could, you know, express like what I was going through. Or like, if you want, I don't want to call it revenge, but it was more like, oh, like you're gonna get it, right?
Mhm.
You're gonna get it because that's how angry I was. So people like these characters not only, and they've evolved over time, right? Before everybody, like all the characters were like near perfect, but you see them as flawed, as we
Mhm.
are,
Yeah.
and so they become our heroes, right? Like, and especially in Wolverine because like he represents so many different things, right? Like not just being damaged, which he is, and it's difficult for him to learn from his experience, but he tries, right? And but also like he keeps trying to be a better man, no matter what people have done to him, and it's extensive over like over a century, right? Um, he still tries, and mostly because he has some good mentors like Charles Xavier. But
Mhm.
he still like he knows that he can try, and that's all of us. We can be damaged and we can be hurt and we could be resentful or jaded, but there's that little voice inside of at least I hope there's this little voice inside of all of us that it's like okay, get up, wake up again and get moving and keep trying.
Absolutely.
So I think
Absolutely.
character.
Yeah. What was it like? Excuse me. I'll edit the sneeze out. Allergy season. What was it like to reach out to creators, writers, artists? I found everyone that I've reached out on here to be generally kind and generally responsive at conventions and things like that. But what was it like to reach out to these people?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned like, okay, John Romita Jr. was the first person. So he had this whole line of people, right? Like waiting. And so, but he wanted to talk about this. So like he and I spoke for like at least 20 minutes, right?
Hmm.
And I kept looking line, kind of like, okay, you do have people waiting. And he didn't, he's just like, no, this is like I want to talk to you. I want to give you the information that you need for your book. And then I spoke to his dad, John Romita Sr., the great, John Romita Sr., and then Len Weed. And of course, Herb Trimpe had passed by that point, and the person that first came up with the idea, Roy Thomas, right? So I got to meet with all of them. So lucky, and I did that through a beloved friend, Chandler Rice. He knew everybody, right? And so he put me in touch. So I was very very fortunate in that regard. But you realize like how much of themselves they put into their characters in some way,
Hmm.
and so and it just kind of evolved with conversations like, oh, I created the costume, or I did this, or I did that. But even as they talk about other characters that they've worked on, I could see that expression of recognition or pride of like, I've gone through some stuff too, right? Or this is why we love this character. So it was a great experience, and I was just so lucky, so grateful to have that opportunity.
You mentioned healing with Wolverine, and that's a great connection with the fact that he can heal, at least physically, but he does carry that inner rage from all of the things that have happened to him and from all of the experiences he's had. Um, I know from Deadpool and Wolverine, the film, there's this montage, if you've seen that, where Wade Wilson is going back and he's meeting these Wolverines through time. Have you seen kind of an evolution of how the character has changed and been
Oh,
represented through
okay.
the years?
First of all, I've seen that film like at least 6 times,
Yes,
and
same.
I, because I loved it. I thought it was done so well. And I found myself so giddy in the theater. Like my fiance told me I was literally like jumping with excitement because I knew every single one of them. Right? I'm like, I wrote about that one, and whatever.
Yep.
Right? And I was so excited, and I think it was long due. Right? Like
Hmm.
the uniform was long due. Right? Like and just even the summary of like how he has evolved, or like there's so many different faces and personalities of Wolverine. Um, so I forgot the original question.
Oh,
I got
how
oh,
he's changed, how he's evolved.
oh yeah, how it's changed. And as you put it, going back to like your statement, like yes, he heals, which is a great bonus, right?
Hmm.
But part of him heals, right? So that's physically. What I found most captivating, there's so many parts I found captivating, but I think I felt for him. I felt sorry for him because um, in psychological terms, he would have what we call dissociative amnesia, right? Or an element of dissociative amnesia. This is after a trauma, the brain tries to protect you, right? And there's biological stuff that happens to the brain. I won't bore you, but um, the brain is like saying, okay, you remember this stuff. You don't need to remember all of that, right? So
Hmm.
like there's gaps in. So I remember writing about like, okay, how does a person evolve if they keep forgetting the trauma? Think about it,
Yeah.
right? Like we all are who we are because of our past, joyous experiences and pain. But like, how do you do that if your brain keeps healing you, And how does he do it? Through his friends, most likely, and through Xavier, like who remind him and who help him to evolve. And I think it's just easier. I kind of like, I always had to think of him as a real person, right?
Hmm.
In order to this project. But I was thinking, okay, well, if I like couldn't remember stuff, right? I would probably try to hide it, right? So, like many people with dementia, so to speak, as an example, they'll say, "Oh no, I know that I already called you, but I just wanted to hear your voice," right? Or I just, what they try to mask it because they're embarrassed that they forgot or so. I think in his case, he's like, "I will always be the animal," right?
Hmm.
Because it was easier for him than to admit that there was something wrong, right? That like there was a missing piece of him, and that he wanted to get close. He never wanted to get close, mostly because he wanted to protect people that he loved. Yes, but what I've argued in this book is like, what does Wolverine fear the most? Right? It's not Sabretooth. It's not anybody else. What does he fear? Vulnerability, which
Hmm.
is what most of us do, right? And for anyone with PTSD, like control and trust and safety, that's like at the top of the list of things that like are very crucially important. And so I definitely got it.
Yeah, yeah, very well said. Absolutely. Well, I think I have one more question that's on the official list, and it's a two-parter. One is, what do you hope that people take away from reading Wolverine? What do you hope that they think about it and reading Untamed? And where can people connect with you and find a copy of the book?
Okay, they can connect to me through my website. It's NOLA Wellness. Um, and also, like you could Google me or like look up the book Amazon, Dr. Suzana Flores. But the easiest way to reach me is through NOLA Wellness. Um, and what do I want people to take away from this? Is that we need sometimes to become our own Wolverine, and like to become our inner Wolverine, meaning admitting that we're flawed and still trying to become better people, right? That realizing the fight. It's not just like a micro level fight, like your fight in the world, right? It's also on a macro level, like when there are people that are being oppressed or hurt, right? And you have the ability to do something, right? That is the fight, like and that's what Wolverine represents. He may not want to at the beginning of anything, right? But in the end, he always comes through it because he can't help it. That's who we need to become, right? We need to become the fighters, and speak up, right? And we to never ever like be afraid of our vulnerability. Like that is the strength, And as Wolverine evolved into the samurai or so, like that's part of it, like letting it in.
Mhm.
So being aware of our vulnerability, but also being aware of our strengths and speaking our voice when we can to defend others.
Love it. Love it. Well, I'm fascinated with the book, fascinated with the work, and appreciating the way that you've uh, explored this character, explored your experiences, and I love that you're uh, weaponizing it, weapon Xing it. I don't know how I want to say that to help others as well. So, Dr. Flores, thank you so much for the time. Thank you for the conversation.
Thank you. This is great.
Yeah.
Enjoy.